Hello, hello. We need to. Good afternoon, steppers. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So I'm going to get us started. Jump right in. All right, everybody. Welcome and happy Saturday to you. Thank you for spending some time with me and joining us here on We the Hypotheorists. We are on episode 2. And just to give a little bit of background about what this show is about, I think we are at a point in the stepping community that we have grown way past a community. We are literally a community-based society. And there is a lot that we can learn from looking at things at a larger scale. So I am going to be bringing on different guests monthly to talk about things on a larger scale, to talk about trends, to talk about history, to talk about what's going on and what our future might look like. So for those who gave me feedback from the first episode and who let me know what things I could do better, I thank you. Everything that is powered by Living the 8 Count is powered by your feedback. So that is tantamount to me, and it only helps me to get better and to give you what you're looking for. So the other thing that a lot of people were questioning, they did not know this was my show. So it is Living the 8 Count, We the Hypotheorists, hosted by Sonji Stewart. You will see me here as your host, but with featured guests. So that's enough explanation for today. Let's get into talking to the historians with our featured guests, but let's hit our promo and get started. All right, I am back and let's get started. So without further ado, I want to welcome our first guest, and he is a content creator. He is a designer. He is one of the original Majestic Gents. He is also a Stepaganza Lifetime Achievement Award winner and a decorated Vietnam era vet, as well as a retired Postal Service worker. Now, that's just a part of a lot of other things that he does. He is a man of God. He has done a lot of firsts to help us innovate and take technology and make it work for steppers and really set the tone and the landscape for people like me to build on what he started. So first, let us welcome the number one featured guest for today, Daniel Land.
Thank you.
Hey, Dan, how are you?
I'm good. Glad to be here. I like that intro.
Hey, I had to do you justice. That's the one thing I said we have to start off with, the person that has really helped to do a lot for us that maybe new steppers now don't really understand. And that's a part of what I would love to do with this show, is to bring back the names that really matter about what we're doing today, because we can't forget our foundation. So thank you. And I'm really honored that you are part of this experience for me.
You're welcome. I appreciate it.
Yes. Yes. Now, I also want to give you a definite shout out for helping me even to get this show started. Um, I'd had this in my mind for about 3 months to get on board with doing live shows, but I knew there was technology involved. And even though I am familiar with technology, it's not something I want to wake up every weekend and I have to think about. And I was glad to be able to use your resources on Steppers Express to help understand very quickly what I needed to do to get this show live and in a professional looking manner, the way that I wanted out the gate. So thank you so much for that.
Glad to hear that.
Okay. So I also want to bring on another featured guest who is someone that has been a mentor for me. When I launched Living the 8 Count in 2016, he was one of the first people that I talked to, and his advice has really helped me not to make some mistakes and to get the brand to where it is today, so that I can share on a platform like this with all of you, and to really help to grow and get to the next level on things. And his advice has stood the test of time. He is creator of the 17-year-old Shy Stepper brand. Everybody, you should know Shy Stepper if you are a stepper. He is the CEO of Culture Loop, a creative marketing agency. He's a creative director. And with the launch of his new project, he is the founder of Memoir Fragrances. Now, everybody, please welcome also Terrence Pratt.
Hey.
Hey, T.
What's
Pratt.
up? What's up?
I am so glad to have you here. I'll just say both of you on the show make a really big difference for me, and I'm ecstatic to have a conversation with you and what you can teach us today, and help give us some insight to the steppers and what we've done and where we're going. All right. So I know that both of you have been key in building what we see as commentary and recording of the history for steppers. And when I started stepping, your resources were very important to me. But things have changed, and you're in different roles doing different things. I want to ask first off, Dan, you have, what is it that has made you stop writing commentary the way that you used to for stepping?
Well, first of all, I didn't do a lot of writing when I first started. I was more focused on the media aspect, video production, getting video online, because at that time you couldn't get a lot of video. You could only get small clips in what they call bitmap sequences. So nobody else was doing those things. So I was writing script, self-taught. So I learned to do those things. And then when you look at the timeline of the progression of media and where we are now, at that time I was doing something that was needed. Right now, you have just so many people doing live streaming. They pretty much fill the gap. So me being in the age group that I'm in now, retired, I really don't, my presence in that area is not needed outside of what you see me do with technology as far as introducing new ways to do live streaming, something current. So I pretty much stopped because you got a lot of people doing it, and they feel the gap. And the younger people, a lot of them write better than me. They do things that the community needed more so than me. I think I played my role, and then okay, just like I took it from someone and went, and then Pratt and others came and went. Timeline wise, we still have a presence, but you don't have that need that you originally had, because that's how time and progression moves. So Did that make
Understood.
sense?
Yeah, it actually
Okay,
it
okay.
does. Everyone has their time to shine, but we have to, stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. So thank
Right.
you for that, Dan. T. Pratt, I know that you have had a lot of rich commentary. What has taken you to where you are now, where you're not writing as much as you used to?
I think Dan kind of hit the nail on the head. I started writing um, because I saw that there was a need for it. It was a dance that I loved so much, and it was starting to grow. So, you know, 2005, well, really 2003, we performed with R. Kelly, and then we performed with him again in 2005 at the MGM Grand. And up until this time, there was no regular commentary on stepping, but the national appetite for stepping was really starting to grow. People wanted to learn more about it, and they just didn't have access to Chicago. So, and then you had another issue where they were starting to be instructors who were traveling, sort of share false information, and that's where the home for real steppers part of Shy Stepper came from, was sort of addressing what I felt were kind of phony or false information being shared. It was my way of saying you could get it from the horse's mouth, right from the steppers here in Chicago. But the reason I stopped is because I think, like any writer, you write from inspiration, and the air that I loved the most and the stepping that I remembered and cherished was starting to evolve into something that wasn't as exciting to me. And not to say it's any less worthy of coverage, I just felt it was probably somebody else's cross to bear at that point. I had sort of run my course. I did it for 16 years or so of writing. People thought I was getting rich. I wasn't making any money doing it. It was a it was a passion project. And so when I didn't love it anymore, it was hard to continue on.
Okay. So tell me, and I know this is a new era for people like, me to write. What is it, T. Pratt, that if you were still writing today, what are some of the topics that would interest you?
Um, I think I would be interested in sort of how technology can evolve sort of the dance today. I'm seeing like Chat GBT and a number of AI platforms, um, digital streaming. I think that a push toward national media content. Stepping should have a documentary on demand. It should just be taking part of this entire digital revolution. So that's interesting to me. Um, yeah, I think just the evolution. I'm always thinking about what's next. What's moving the culture forward, and that's sort of the thing I would be interested in talking about now.
Okay. And it's funny that you mentioned Chat GPT. You're about the 10th person that I've heard talking about it in the last week. We do a lot of that at work. So yeah, heard about that. So Dan, talking about technology, I think you were at the forefront in terms of how to uh, apply digital transformation to what we were doing in the stepping community in terms of media. Tell me, in your opinion, what impact you see technology having on stepping as you've seen it in your experience coming up. Was it good, bad, indifferent? Like, how has technology helped us and how has it hurt us, if at all?
I think when we originally started putting media, like T. Pratt said, a lot of people didn't have access to stepping. They were hearing about it. I'm talking pre R. Kelly. So you had people in different spots like Atlanta, Detroit, uh, uh, out California. You had a few out of towners that were gravitating to stepping, but they didn't have access to see stepping. So
Mhm.
those video clips came in handy as far as them seeing it. And at the same time that we had started doing the web, putting stepping on the web with a stronger presence, I had also, that's how I got into video, because I wanted to put the clips on my website. So I got into the video thing, and at the same time, we were transitioning from analog to digital in the technology world. So you had these small cameras that they were using over in the Gulf War and other places. So you can go into these events now and capture a mobile presence. I could get it right on the dance floor, capture the dancing, and put it up in these bitmap sequences and other small clips on the web, or share it with people, so people were starting to see more. So that motivated me. Each thing led to something else. And just like anything else, when you get into something and you share that, other people will embrace it. So then I started taking people in partnership, like me and Marky G would go up to like MSBU and film where I needed a second cameraman, and we would do some things and go home and edit it and put that out there. So all these things played into technology. And then you had other people, when we started doing that, other people started doing that. Then you had Marky B come along. I think he was using the Canon form of the type of cameras we were using. And then he started doing his thing. And now you got the strong presence on technology and how it moved through the timeline. One of the things I like to emphasize is that at the time that I started, I would type in Steppin, for example, on YouTube, and nothing would come up. Not one clip, not one video, not anything. So that was another need for something that was needed in the STEP community. So now those things just led down a timeline to get us to where we are now. So when I look at that, I appreciate the timeline of technology with the stepping.
Okay. And to be sure, because it took me a couple of times talking to you and just understanding things, you definitely had stepping publications that preceded you. So you were not the first stepping publisher of a website, but you were the first stepping publisher of a website with animation.
Right. Here's how I've always explained that, because when going back to your last question, that's another reason sometimes we have to kind of yield to the writing and the commentary, because sometimes it becomes conflicting. You know, you get into controversy. So when you make a claim, people will say you was the first to do a website. That was never my claim. Static websites, then you had what they call dynamic websites. I was the first to do a dynamic website where you had animation, movement. I had music. I had artists where they covers on, and then you could click it and hear clips of their music. So most of your websites on Steppin prior to Steppers Express were static sites. So you had Leon Witten, you had Jackie Dace did Majestic Gents. Leon had did Rose Paradise. All of those were static sites. Marky B had did Razzmatazz. But all of those sites were geared towards a specific club or organization or a person. None of those sites were focused on the dance, Steppin. So Steppers Express focused on making the dance the star, and all of the other things surrounded the dance instead of the other way around.
Perfect.
So the dynamics of a dynamic site made that possible.
Awesome. And that, for me, I think for every stepper, we're glad to be hearing music and watching videos on websites.
Exactly. Or dynamic sites in general. And that's what you get now, dynamic sites. And then you got social media. I always say, and T-Pratt could correct me because I'm stepping into his area. The dynamic sites were followed with the presence of social media. So I always say that Shy Stepper was the first interactive site where people could actually give their opinions and go into the social media aspect of what we're seeing today with Facebook and that. But I'll let him talk on that.
Yeah, that's a good setup for my next question, because Terrence, that was my question for you. In terms of digital transformation and technology, just talk about social media and what difference it made for you and Shy Stepper.
Well, social media was really the beginning of, in my opinion, it was the beginning of the end for Shy Stepper. Um, because uh, we created the form. It was like the hottest thing in stepping into. This is 2006. Um, and it was a predecessor to Facebook, because it started the same year as Bossa. Shy Stepper started the same year as Bossa, Media Takeout. Facebook had started a year before Shy Stepper, but it hadn't reached national popularity yet.
Yeah.
It didn't get like national adoption till around 2008. So in 2006, when we launched, we had like 2 solid years of the forum on Shy Stepper, really being this community where people could come on, create profiles just like they do on social media, and have conversations back and forth. The only difference in the forum is that you had some people who showed up as themselves, and then some people who showed up as anonymous. And, and it was an anonymous piece that kept up a lot of craziness and foolishness. Now, when social media came along, we could no longer contain the conversation within the walls of the forum. The people who might have felt like they were overlooked or didn't have a big enough voice or whatever were able now on social media to create their own voice and personality. And so, yeah, I think social media from a Shy Stepper perspective was the beginning of the end. Now, when social media came on the other side, we started to actually figure out a way to make some money, which was different than previously because now we attached other things to it, like parties that we could promote. And we weren't the first people to collect money on a party digitally. We were actually the second. Sunshine did it first for her dancing divas or Dons and Divas contest she did. But we were the first ones to do it on a massive scale and to have a big success with it, selling tickets to a party online. So allowing us to connect to a larger audience allowed me to make more money from advertising, to be able to tell that story for the contest, to bring sponsors in because now we had a case for our reach, our numbers, um, and of course to promote our parties and events.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I had to just because I was surprised at the answer, but I understand the wave that happens when new things are introduced.
Yeah.
But I checked this morning, and Shy Stepper, your Facebook page has 80,000 followers, and your IG 18,700 followers.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone on social media right now has those type of numbers or close to it to tout and promote. But it was definitely proof that you showed how you leverage social media to help build your brand.
Yeah, let me speak on that real quick because it's funny. I was teasing Pete the other day saying people think that Shy Stepper is gone, but I still have the biggest media, the biggest media presence in the stepping community. We just evolved. I think that's been the story of my participation in the stepping community is to see what's next. What is the evolution of stepping? And I saw where people were going in social media, um, and how content was being leveraged to promote things. And I just started to evolve to tap into the taste of where people are right now. And so I started investing in growing my social media following while Shy Stepper was still up. Um, and and this is the evolution of it. I still feel like I'm a part of it. I still feel like Shy Stepper is alive. I just feel like it's alive in a different form now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. It's still alive for me. I'm on IG daily watching videos. So, Dan, talking about evolution, let's talk about looking ahead. And for me, this question is of personal interest because I write for my blog. This show is just an add-on to that experience, but I've built my following and subscribers based on a written format. which a lot of people, I mean, point blank tell me, Sonji, get with it. This, writing and people reading stuff is dying quickly.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? And also, what do you think is the next innovation to look out for? What's the next big technology thing that we need to prime ourselves and be ready to adapt and work with?
Well, we all know that people don't like to read lengthy blogs and things now. And me and T. Pratt, as we discussed earlier, even when you write a review or you write as a critic or something, critique it, you will get people that disengage. Even in the controversies and the conflicts on social media, no one wants to read a lengthy response to the argument. But if we don't embrace technology, see, when we started with video online, that was new. Right now, you have these algorithms and all of these things taking place on social media. You got IG, you got TikTok, and everything is fast and quick. So if we don't take advantage of that as a community, because you mentioned yourself, the community has made a cultural shift. It has shifted from community to cultural. So now you're dealing with national and global. So you have to take advantage of the tools that's available. Now, you guys mentioned some of the technology available. So I use a lot of different tools because a lot of things are automated now. But I notice steppers are not using it. So even in a video clip that I might see, it's just two people on there dancing. There's no algorithms being used. There's no editing. There's no anything that will enhance that dance more to draw people outside of the community that may want to see the dance a little bit closer. And that's basically what we did back in the day. So if you look at the evolution, if you look at the timeline of technology, I always say this, in the past, when I started Steppers Express, it was about what I was seeing, a need for. A lot of stuff was based on my opinion, my personal opinion. A lot of arguments I was having and conflict was based on my opinion versus X, Y, and Z. But it was a reason for that because the people who preceded me, they were so set on that one genre of steppers or boppers, as they was calling themselves, that I had to be forceful with my opinion. So I was recruiting people like Dre and trying to get them to be showcased. I was recruiting Steppin' B. I was dealing with Mac 3. I was trying to get the current steppers at that time because they were more entertaining and more appealing than the traditionalists or the bop or those who were making that like it was the only part of stepping. So I used digital to do that. So now we have these same tools available in the current tense, but they're not being used. So I got to read a blog or I got to see YouTube video. And then you might have IG. Terrence used a lot of historic footage because people sent it to him, as well as some he captured or produced himself. But if we don't take it another step, if we don't find the younger people in the culture to teach them or give them what we have so they can do the same that we did. Hey, I'm going to take what Dan, T. Pratt, Marky B, and all the others did, and I'm going to put this new spin on it and put these algorithms with it and put TikTok with it and take it to another level. Then it's gonna stagnate. It's gonna sit dormant and not move. And that's terrible to me.
I'm learning in the moment. Thank you for the challenge. T. Pratt, what do you think of that? Are there other innovations that we should be looking out for and being ready to move on to?
Yeah, I mean, I work in my other career as a director and a producer, and so I'm kind of looking at the evolution of media. Everything used to be controlled by people that were so big we didn't have access to them, so we couldn't participate in television back then. Unless you knew the owner or the marketing director at ABC, but that's not the case anymore. Through over-the-top television and a variety of streaming networks like Tubi and places like that, you can actually create real stories, and place them on platforms that if they are watched, it can be monetized.
Right.
So that, I think that to me is the technology. We're moving towards a video world, and I think that's how we innovate in stepping. I did want to comment on Dan's observation as well, um, regarding social. I found that the reason why on Shot Stepper I sort of moved towards just these very basic clips was because I saw a sort of a content shift that moved away from curated content to content that felt organic. It almost seemed like the more organic and looked like it came straight from your phone, the better it performed. We see that in production as well. When we edit these videos and make them really pretty, they look better, but they don't perform as well um, on social media.
Right.
Another, I would say that the one difference there is TikTok. You know, Sanji, we do have 8,000 or 9,000 on TikTok too. On
Oh, wow. I
on
didn't check that
TikTok,
channel.
yeah, on TikTok, it's more what Dan said. You add those bells and whistles to it. Like I oftentimes they don't care that the music and the dance match up like they do on Instagram and Facebook. I
Hmm.
can I can lay a James Brown track over some dance movements that don't even match up, and it'll do 500,000 views. You
Wow.
know what I mean? So depending on the technology and where people participate in their appetite for content, the content performs different in different places. Facebook to me is like what email used to be.
Right.
It's the modern version of email. Instagram is like a public journal, a diary. And now TikTok is the new hot platform to participate in. 150 million people using it in the United States alone.
Wow. Okay, I
Can,
need to get
can I
involved.
can I speak on something to add
Sure.
to that?
Yes,
We'll
absolutely.
a lot of times we look at the front end, like TikTok, Instagram. You'll notice on my YouTube channel, Steppers Express, what I share is some of the tools that you may use to produce video
Mm.
or audio now to create these TikTok videos and some of the other things that producers create, because those are the things that you may need in order to produce a documentary or anything dealing with video, because it is a video society now.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at some of the stuff that I'm using it because a lot of times when I interact with younger people, I learn things that was not the way when I was doing a lot of this video production. Like I was working on a play. Young man came in. I was going to be the light operator on the play, and I'm thinking you got to sit there like the old day and wait on. Okay, go. And then the young man came in and programmed the whole play on a computer. And the night of opening night, he wasn't even there. All I had to do was wait on the director, stage manager to say go and hit the button. And it went through the whole play in sync with the actors throughout the theater, throughout the play, from beginning to end. And this was for 5 nights straight. So these are the type of things that when we embrace these tools, which is why I share them, the tools that I know about, like ATM Pro, like Stream Deck, like StreamYard and some of the EV Mux, and you learn these things, and then you can enhance your production. It's quick, it's fast to than what we used to be. So you can hit a button and edit a whole video instead of sitting there, click, click, cut, upload, download, all of that.
Right.
You don't have to do that anymore. So TikTok and those things allow you to do this. So we have to embrace it. The stepping culture have to embrace it in order to move forward. It's automatic.
Okay, I heed your warning.
Yeah.
So, on the same vein, I do want to dig into a thread there because technology is so easy for us to pick up and use. And for those who want to take the effort to do some research, they can get something up and started in within 24 hours. one of the things, and this is advice I want not just for me, but for all the people who have called me about this issue. In the stepping community, we tend to have a few live shows, and we have people that may be going live at the same time. And just like how we have people with events, weekend events, they want to lock in an event, is this time is for them. It seems to be becoming a conflict in our broadcast across different shows. What was there in your time? I'm going to ask Terrence this. Did you have a cooperative plan with other publishers? And what would be your advice in a time like today where we are facing that type of conflict?
Look, so that question makes me laugh, because I have a completely different view than most of the stepping community on this. First of all, I did not have a cooperative agreement with anybody. I think there were certain people that I had a great relationship with, like Dan. Could call Dan and ask him a question. I always pay homage to Dan as the pioneers, like my OG in the stepping media game. So, and that's why I was telling you, even today, I wanted to be on the show with Dan because I respect, Dan as sort of the guy that I looked to when I was starting to innovate after. But Marky B and I had a totally different relationship. I wanted to crush Marky B. God rest his soul. I'm not saying that to speak ill of him and his passion, but my relationship with him, everything he did, I wanted to do it better. I didn't want to collaborate. I wanted to compete. I wanted to be better than him in every way. And that's just the way I felt. And I still feel like there is no such thing as market saturation or any of that. The people decide ultimately what they're going to pay attention to. If I launch a show and someone else launches a show, Revolt and Complex might launch their shows at the same time. The people are going to decide what they want to pay attention to. If you want more people to pay attention to you, make your show more compelling. Offer something that they won't get any other places, and then they'll pay attention to you. That's how I feel. I feel like, complaining about somebody being on your date, like even with the world's largest weekend, it's been a couple times when other people have decided to throw a party on our night. Mm-hmm. My message to Dre in those moments is always like, we got to crush him. That's just how I feel. You know what I mean? I don't mind because, and I also say about the world's largest weekend, the people can decide when it's time for the party to end too. When they decide they don't want to come anymore, the price is too high or whatever, and the numbers don't make sense anymore, we shut the doors. It's all about the people.
Okay. I like that, because I believe competition will make us great and help us to recognize all the things we've talked about today and push us to evolve. So I definitely can't argue with that. All right, Brian Forbes says, step your game up. I like that.
Hey, Sonji, plus you got to look at some of the modern tools that's available. It's just like when you go on an app, like you got Netflix, you got Prime, you got Apple. They all got some of the same type of movies, but those algorithms tell them what the audience like and don't like. And if you notice, a lot of live streaming shows today are covering pretty much the same content, advertising the same events, interviewing the same people. Now, back in the day, even though you had Steppers USA, Shy Steppers, Steppers Express, it's just like the dance. Each one of those platforms had different styles, and you can expect different things from those platforms that people embraced. Like I said earlier, mine was more of a individual opinion, which people probably said, hey, he never let me speak my mind, but I didn't want you to speak your mind because prior to me, other people had spoke their mind and had kind of restricted everybody. Terrence came along, opened that up. So Shy Stepper had the identity that people can exchange their views, whether they was conflicting or controversial, but they got a chance to say, hey, I don't agree with you, et cetera, et cetera. So through time, now we got these live streaming platforms. And if you look at some of them, because I visit several shows, it's 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 different, but it's the same content. And just like Terrence expressed, he had an attitude about me that differed from Marky B. I feel the same way, but we had respect for each other's as peers, as colleagues, because a lot of the people that I was working with were gravitating to Marky B. However, it's other dynamics that were taking place for that to happen. So you had an attitude that, hey, my video better than his. Why they gravitating to him? So those are other things that you're dealing with. So that's the same thing that happens now. So what makes a person want to see your pluggers when I got the same pluggers on my page that he has on his page? Yeah. So you have to come to that conclusion as a content creator. What am I going to do different to make them come to my live stream instead of my competition? Not I'm going to shut him down, but what's going to make them come to my live stream instead of his? That's capitalism. That's corporate America.
Art in America.
Right. You don't go out and blow his building up. You know what I'm saying?
So we talk a lot about evolution, and I think there's also a flip side to the coin that I'd love for us to look at. So we say that, the dance is evolving and technology is evolving. Within the parameters of the stepping community, are there things that you see not evolving that need to evolve, that are holding us back or having some other influence that is not beneficial to us? Terrence, what are your thoughts on that?
I struggle on it. One of the things I love about stepping is the fact that I can disappear for long periods of time and come back to the community and it still feels relatively the same. There are a few new faces. I don't know that I want to ever innovate past that, the familiarity that I have when I come back to the scene after a long time. It's almost like a long lost family. I think that what stepping is going to have to embrace in the future, uncomfortably so, is that it is a national dance now. Whereas the greatest concentration of steppers for many years have all come from Chicago, you're starting to see that being spread out now. Some of the better dancers now are evolving from other cities. Some of the better instructors now are evolving from other cities, which means that the talent's going to be spread out. And we can still, in the same way that they sort of pay homage to Mecca today in kind of a ceremonial way, but we recognize that that religion has spread all over the world. It's going to be the same way with stepping. We'll have the sentiment as the Mecca of stepping, but I think that the dance is going to continue to evolve and spread itself out all over the nation. And I think that rather than keep fighting it, Chicago might want to embrace it, because by embracing the evolution of stepping, you get to cement your place as sort of the grandfather of all of it, the grandmother of all of it. That's my thought.
Absolutely. Dan, anything to add on to that?
I deal with perspective. You hear a lot of times we argue about history. My thing is, it's not that we don't know history. I know my history, and the newer steppers, or as y'all call them, new schoolers, know their history. They can only begin their history with where they began in the dance. And sometimes I think the conflict itself causes the stagnation and stymies the dance from moving forward outside of Chicago change. Because even when we started going outside of Chicago, you get a lot of conflict, like you were selling the dance out or something to that effect. And my attitude was that you have to expand because people are interested outside of Chicago. And I predicted then, in some of my writings then, that it would come from Atlanta and it would come from Detroit. The better dancers would come from those two areas because they were most focused on learning the dance and embracing the dance. But as you look at the history, we don't fully understand the history until we come together and get a clear picture of all the variables that make up the different histories. Then we won't be able to understand the dance outside of Chicago, because everybody got a history. The older boppers got their history, the younger boppers, the steppers got their history. They can only start where they started. But at the same time, we have to leave off where we left off. If I started in the 70s and then I kind of dropped out, and you had these guys like Dre and Steppin' B and Mac 3 and all of them come along, you have to respect that place on the timeline. And then you have to respect your place on the timeline and see how it progressed and have respect for each other, instead of my history is most important compared to your history is most important and who's to follow. And that's basically what I'm seeing, is a lot of arguments about who gets to claim the dance when the dance is claimed itself. This dance is national. And that's why I mentioned earlier, it went from community to cultural. And we're having a problem accepting that cultural shift, because we want to keep it community, because a lot of my relationships are community. My boys, we started the gents together. We all grew up together, et cetera, et cetera. People knew each other in the 70s and the 60s, and they want to keep that close knit. But it's gone. It's beyond that now, right. And you have to accept that and embrace that, and see how can you make that work for the better. Not I'm gonna squash you, man. I'm gonna destroy you. I'm gonna make your history a lie, and for my history to be the truth. And that's not going to benefit Steppin' at all. That's just my take on it.
Thank you. And I appreciate the point you made, and this is not the word you used, but to me it sounded like the personal vendetta of stepping, that seed that is within some of us in terms of our ego, to hold on to something to keep it close rather than far reaching.
So yeah, it's not my dance.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's our dance. I don't care how you sum it up. It's our dance. Somebody left it to you, and you're going to leave it to somebody. It's not our dance. It's a dance. It speaks for itself. Steppin' is the star. When you gone, Steppin' gonna still be here. And isn't that what happened? Isn't that the evolution of the dance? The dance was here before me, and I'm in my 60s, late 60s. It was here before me, and it's gonna be here when I'm gone. So how can I claim something that doesn't belong to me?
Absolutely. So in one of my interviews with DJ Sam Chapman, he said, you follow the music, you will see where the dance has gone. What other factors outside of the music, if you agree with that statement, do you believe are influencers in what stepping evolves into?
Well, for me, is what we were just talking about is location, geography, has a big deal. I'll give you just one example. You hear a lot of people talk about how stepping, and even if you see stepping now, it's still performed in primarily, I'm just to say the hood. You know what I mean? For lack of a better word. And you hear like the Dungeon guys talk about how, there was a strong hustler's influence on that era of stepping. But then when you take it to a place like LA, the communities that started to gravitate toward in LA were people like Talibu Jadi, who was a part of Maulana Karanga's sort of outfit. And these guys were cultural nationalists, so to speak, you know what I mean? And steeped in culture. You started to see another community out there that was a little bit more well-to-do. They had more money. That all of those things sort of gradually shape how the dance looks in these various cities. When I would go to Cleveland, I would be frustrated because all the music was super fast. In Chicago, I was used to the dance being cool, smooth, sexy, and I'm like, man, I'm thinking it was just going to be a segment, but it would be fast the whole night. And if the DJ played what we would call a Chicago Steppers cut, it would clear the floor in these other cities. And so I think that, and then I remember there was a movement a while back that they were going to have a LA version of Chicago Stepping that didn't make sense to me back then. I don't know that that's still a movement anymore, but you start to see the influence of other cultures sort of adding their own seasoning, just like food. As food travels around the world, the seasoning changes. And I feel like dance is the same way. Other cultures start to add a little season. I was in Las Vegas. They were doing like these little bitty routines and hand movements with it. And so I think outside of the music, you start to see culture, the influence of these various cultures on the dance as well, will impact how it looks in the future.
Okay, thank you, Terrence.
Yeah.
Dan, do you have anything to add to that?
I totally agree with some of the things that culture added, but at the same time, we have to understand the history. Like the dungeon, a lot of times the story starts with the dungeon. That's not where the dance started. This dance started with socials and high school and neighborhood youth programs. That's where it started for many of us in my age group. So when you look at some of the things that's been added and you look at the timeline when, say, instructions came, then you start to get in a lot of these different cultures integrating turns and routines into the dance itself. So you can't just look at the music because, let me give you a good example. Disco, when disco started, disco didn't have its own music. It had to borrow music from the African American R&B markets in order to move itself forward. Eventually, a lot of groups started making disco music. It was the same with the earlier bopping and the bop. All they really had was Motown. So what we call walking, they called the stride. So you strided a little bit and you danced a little bit. So the dance was dictated by the music. These are some of the pieces that's often missing from the stories or some of the information that's put out because we are started at a point and we'll argue that point and drive that point. And we won't look at the fact that a lot of instructors incorporated salsa into the dance. They incorporated ballroom into the dance. They incorporated different cultural moves into the dance as well as the music. So you can't just follow the music. So what I tried to do when I started Steppers Express, it was Steppers Express, the jazz of ballroom dancing. And the reason was for that was because I always equated it with jazz, but not because of jazz music, because of all the variables that move inside of the jazz culture, like contemporary jazz, fusion jazz, classic jazz. So if you look at it from that perspective, jazz is the main object, but it has so many variables that you can't take one of those variables and say, this is jazz. It has to include in the whole story with all the different forms of jazz that goes with that story. And if you take any of those out, you don't have the true story. You don't have the whole story. You just got a little piece. So everybody's arguing over pieces of a cake. You gotta talk about how the whole cake is made and whether that's music, whether that's routines, turns, cultures, footwork, and different times and periods. You have to include all that in order to get a real picture of stepping. And I don't think that's happening. It'll continue to evolve, but if we're going to do anything structured or concrete to where we can have a cultural footprint, we have to come together and include all these stories and understand their significance to the timeline.
Mm. So you already started answering my question, but I'm going to put it out there. And if there's something you want to add, Dan, let me know. But if we are to 20 years from now, if someone reading about stepping is to understand what stepping is today in the last decade, what are the things that we should be sharing about this time for 20 years from now? Someone understands what's happening and what stepping is today.
Like video or any other content, I think we need to be recording. We need to be getting some form of structure. Now, you have a lot of people in the stepping community, like T. Pratt, like myself, like you. We have intellectuals. We have people on every level, every walk of life. We have scholars. We have all these people in this community, and we spend most of our time discussing and exchanging controversies and conflict. Okay, who's going to sit down and start writing books? Who's going to start writing scholarly reviews and previews about stepping? Who's going to approach this from an area where we can archive and record for those 20 years from now, the same as we've done with video? Remember, there was a time when if you discussed Ice Ray or Romeo or some of the people that we've seen in our years as teenagers, you had no footage on them. So now we've covered that area. The area I think we need to cover now is a more intellectual approach to stepping from a cultural perspective and start recording that and having that coincide with this footage, with the contest, and with the people that's involved in those timelines and how they moved about. We put so much emphasis on the actual dance, the dance floor, who won a contest, who used the 6 count, the 8 count. You know the arguments. We've had them all. But we're not looking at all of the other things that's needed, which is we need writers. We need producers. We need documentaries. We need the things that's going to archive this dance for the future. It has to be done. And last but not least, you have to format, because we may understand the dance from rhythm and repetition. But most people, if they're going to embrace this dance, it has to be fragmented and broken down to where they can understand it. The only way you can do that is to format it to where I say, I'm an instructor, then you have something or some criteria to certify me as an instructor, opposed to I just woke up this morning and I'm an instructor. Well, I woke up this morning and I'm a book writer or I'm a movie maker, when my body of work doesn't support that claim. We have to do it without argument, but with unity and cohesiveness and togetherness. We got to make it happen. 20 years from now, somebody can pick that up. It's archived. Okay. Until then, it's not gonna happen.
I'd love to hear your opinion on that as well, T. Pratt.
I don't know that I can add much to it. I pretty much think that Dan covered it all. I think if you want to know what we want to know 20 years from now, look at the questions that we asked about the previous 20 years. And I think that, Dan hit it on the head. I heard stories of Lil Mike and how great he was, but I never saw him dance.
Right.
And I think now we have those bases covered. We argue about who the greatest are, and it's an argument that can never be won. We never saw Little Mike, but we have to trust the judgment of the pioneers of the dance, because they told us the same thing about Little Alfred. And then when the footage surfaced to Little Alfred, we said, well, my goodness, they were right. He was amazing. So you have to trust their judgment, but now we have that part covered. We'll be talking about the Dre's and the Tickmans and the Maurice Turners and the West Side Mikes 20 years from now. And we'll have footage to back up how great they were. So I think the next evolution of it is what Dan says, archive it and put it in the history books.
Awesome. So I want to touch on this because I think a common thing we all get excited about, no matter what, how much experience we've had in the community, is the world's largest. Terrence, focusing on the future, do you think the world's largest steppers contest will be around in 10 years? And if so, what do you think it will be like then?
I don't think it'll be around in 10 years, unfortunately. I think right now, the world's largest is the confluence of a number of things happening at the same time. Pete Frazier, for instance, he has the popularity in the community. He has the know-how. He has the passion to go out and, even against a lot of criticism, put the content, claims of cheating every year and all the stuff that we had to go through to put it together. He continues to forge ahead, but Pete is in his 60s now. So to say, will it be around in 10 years, will be whether Pete, who owns the service mark to the dance as well. Just so you cover that part. He owns the service mark to the world's largest name. and the trademark is owned by VH1, or not VH1, V103.
Right.
So VH1 V103 owns the trademark and Pete owns the service mark. The only way Pete could be trumped is if V103 decided that they wanted to also run a contest the same weekend as Pete. Then the service mark, the trademark would trump the service mark. So Pete would then have to license the world largest name to someone else to be able to continue it forward. That's one part of it, the legal part of it. The second part of it, the enthusiasm to continue it. I don't feel that Pete in 10 years is going to still want to be out there running from party to party, selling tickets, buying radio time. We're already running into a situation where the prices to put the contest on are sky high, and we lose in sponsorship. Blue Cross Blue Shield not going to be a part of it this year. They were a major partner for both of us, for me and Pete. When they drop out, the amount of money that they put forth intimately impacts the ability to create a successful and a positive experience for the dance community. So, there are a number of risks with the world's largest being able to continue into the future. I don't see it happening, and I also don't see anyone like a Pete Frazier outside of myself, and I don't have the interest to continue the world largest 10 years from now. That's just my thought. I could be wrong.
Okay. That's a different perspective. So I want to close
Can I say
out.
something about the world largest?
Oh, sure, Dan, please.
Not that I be involved with the contest, but we can look at the contest and see that it's one of the only major events that is kind of like a test that gives you your credibility, and that's basically because it's the only thing that is around in order for you to make that claim. I won the world largest. What else can you say that you won? So it's like the Oscars of stepping. But when you look at it from an economic standpoint, because I know Pete as well, I've been knowing Pete my whole life. I know his personality. I remember when he had that vision to take over the world largest. So he puts a lot into it. So if you look at it from an economic standpoint, he's one of the few people that put those funds back into the stepping community. So if you look at it from the economic standpoint, you have to look at the flying and the traveling and the rooms and all the things that's involved now. Mm-hmm. How much of that actually comes back to the stepping community unless it comes back through that organization and that event? That event started out as an outreach program. So they had funds, they had sponsors, they had people giving them money. Right now, they generate most of those funds on their own. They got some small sponsors, but that can be very taxing. And when you start getting into your 60s and 70s, like T. Pratt said, that's a heck of a lot of work to do. So we know what Pete does as far as him holding that every year. And like I always say, people complain with the same complaints every year instead of adding any suggestions of improvement. They complain and complain and complain. This happened, this happened. That can be taxing. So just for an individual to be out in public and have people making these complaints constantly, how much longer would you want to do it for the next 10 years? So I can't see, I'm just speaking from the friendship perspective. Personality wise, I can't see him dealing with that another 10 years. From an economic standpoint, I can't see people continuing to invest in something that really has no return or has no benefit, no outreach, no sponsorship, no branding. When you walk into a contest or you watch it on video, you don't see any sponsors or banners hanging around like you do at some of these other major events. So right. You have to take all that into account. How much longer could it sustain without economic support? How much bigger can it grow? The contest pretty much gives out the same prize money that it gave out 15, 20 years ago, regardless of inflation and everything else. I'm going to say this last. I made a video on the economics of stepping, and I'm going to put it up on YouTube pretty soon. And it deals with these factors as far as we don't own no airlines. We don't own no ballrooms. We don't own none of these things. How long can we sustain if we continue this behavior, whether it's the world largest or anything else, for the next 10 years? And that's something we got to give some thought.
Thank you,
one
Dan.
thing, Sonji, let me
Go
add
ahead.
one little piece on the end of that, because
Yes.
Dan covered it and he made me think about it. Another really seminal piece of the world largest being successful, when I said there was a confluence of a number of things that Pete had to make it successful, Pete got his own money.
Right.
That's the other thing. So whoever picked it, like Pete can afford to fly from city to city and do so. I just wanted to add that piece because you made me think of that, Dan. So
Yeah.
that's all.
Okay. And I mean, I appreciate where both of you shared on that, because in everything there's, I'll say, bits and pieces here and there. In the last year, I've tried to do some articles on my blog that talk more about the economics of stepping. And that's one of the motivators, even for a show like this, because we are a business. We are a capitalist society, that all the things we talked about here, the competition, trying to attract customers from someone else, all of those things, we are in that dynamic. But I don't think people realize the business of stepping. And I'm really trying to bring awareness. So I'm looking out for that show from you, Dan Land, so that we can shed some more light and start those conversations in a richer way. I definitely had a good time in this conversation, but there's one question that I would like for both of you to, give me perspective on. What is, in all the articles, whether you produced them or someone else, if there is an article or story that was featured in the stepping community that you believe we should be reading today because the information it tells us stands the test of time, what is that article that you would tell us, go read that right now today? T. Pratt.
I did an interview with Sam Chapman. And Sam broke down the history of stepping from even when, how the dance was named, and some of those sort of seminal players in those early days, when Sam was a bus driver and driving steppers from one side of town to the other to go to ballrooms, and how, they had relationships with gangsters like Jeff Ford, that would have a no humbugging, which is no gang banging clause to give steppers free passage to parties in rival gang territory, to be able to come and party in a rival gang territory without being harmed, because they had the blessings of the chiefs of the other gangs. Like, all of that is so incredibly interesting and informative. And then my dear sister, if I add one more, was Janice Robertson. God rest her soul. That was my good friend. She talked very, I think that it's easy to understand the stories of my era because the people are still here telling the stories. But to kind of go in depth with people like Janice and Sam, to be able to understand the period before us, I find was something that I think would definitely be worth going back to read. I took it offline, but I had to figure out a way to get it back up so people could check it out.
Okay, thank you. Would love that. Dan Land.
You know what? When we was writing back in the day, I know when I was writing about stepping back in the day, I was only writing something that I thought about from my opinion, and a lot of people use that article uh, uh, on different websites and different ways. I've had people rip that article off and put it in publication and make claims on it. And I was pretty pissed at the time, but now I see it as a compliment because my temperament is a little different. But at that time, I was smoking. And people used to write and ask me, could they use it? But now when I look back on it, I wrote that article just off what I thought. There was no research. There was nothing to cite. And most of the articles that I read on stepping are secondary sources, and there's no citation. There's no research. They're just like me or anyone else. They're speaking as as a primary source, something they may have experienced. I haven't read an article yet that really put stepping in its proper perspective. And I'm not saying that from arrogance. I'm saying it because I don't think it exists yet. We've covered contests and counts and dance and instructions and all the things that stepping has, but I don't think I've read anything in all my years or wrote anything in all my years that has put stepping in a framework where it can be defined and used as a means of giving a clear-cut description of the culture, community, however you want to put it. So my answer to that question would be, I'm still waiting on that article.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Challenge to all of us that are out here publishing now.
Yeah. One of y'all gonna write it. The foundation is there for it to be written, but I think in everything that we do, we play the part that we've been assigned. And I see that from a spiritual perspective. And I'll say this. When I was with the Majestic Gents, I remember standing in the center of Willowbrook Ballroom when I got the call to do what I do now. And I had no experience with none of this. But that call was real. And I followed that call. And somebody's going to get that call. We don't know who they are. They may be dancing in the 50-yard line this evening. But they're going to get that call and they're going to write that article. But we do know that the Leon Wittens, the Marky B's, the Dan Lands, the T. Pratts have laid the groundwork, the Sam Chapmans. You've laid the groundwork, the foundation for that article to be written. Now, who's going to write it? Is it you or somebody on this line? I'm waiting on it.
All right, we heard the challenge and we are done.
Challenge.
Okay? Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for spending a part of your Saturday with us. You know, my audience is here as well, and I saw a few people chiming in. Folks, I'm sorry, I'm still trying to get used to the comments piece and leaving you in, but we're working on things and growing with the show. I want to close out just, are there any special projects or things upcoming that you want to share with the audience of what you're doing and that's important to you? Let's start with Terrence.
Yeah, well, we got the date for the world's largest weekend, September 15th. So we'll probably do our pre-sales in April and then launch to the public like we always do May 1st. So we'll be back. I think this might be 15 or 16 years now. So I always just want to say thank you to the Steppin community for allowing me to share, to have a voice and to trust me to have a voice for so many years. And I want to thank, right now, I think it's like this is the perfect group of people. I feel like the cream in the middle of the Oreo. I got Dan, who was my predecessor. I mean, you being the one coming behind and me coming behind Dan. You know what I mean? So I want to thank both of you guys for your contribution. Dan for inspiring me and supporting me early on, and always being a positive voice and just a really good brother. And Sonji for being curious and continuing to keep Steppin journalism alive. I appreciate both of you guys.
You're welcome. Thank you. Dan Land, you want to close us out with some good things for you?
Well, as I shared with you guys before the show, I'm working on some personal goals, but at the same time, I'm going to continue to populate my channel over at youtube.com with tutorials about the different things that I use for live streaming. So if you can go over there and find anything helpful to you, that will be constantly available. We already know I got the historic Webmaster Dan over on YouTube, where I share all types of information about all the things that I do. And I got an upcoming live streaming show that will be launched in mid-May. But these things are not about stepping. I mean, some of them, like tutorials, covers how to make stepping live streams. But everything else, those are just things that I do personally. So I also want to thank the stepping community, because if not for the experience from the gents till now, I wouldn't have had the life that I had with technology, and been able to share that with so many people, and so much footage, and there's so many dancers that I had the privilege and the joy to capture in contests or just in clubs, and some of the relationships that was established from that. I just wouldn't have never had a chance to have that. So I want to thank everybody. I want to thank T. Pratt, because I'm gonna say this and then I'm gonna end, because he probably remember this. I'm not gonna say any names, because I was telling you about something I was pissed off earlier, and I was writing all this stuff, and T. Pratt said, "You want me to post that, Dan?" And I think I told him no. But when I read all that I wrote in my anger, I said, "You know what, Dan? You need to write. You need to learn how to write a little better." So that has been very much improved these days. So I'm writing pretty good these days, T. Pratt.
I said that.
No, I said that after reading what I had wrote you in response to my anger about my article being ripped. You asked me, did I want you to post my response? And after reading it, I'm glad you didn't, because it's a positive in everything. So I was like, no, man, you can't post that, because I can't write worth a damn. So I'm just glad I had that experience, because like I say, I'm going to always work on my weaknesses. And that's the thing about stepping. It's always taught me to go for it. You want to film? Go for it. And they allowed me to come in with my camera and do my thing. Dre, Steppin' B, all the people that trusted me, Mo, Cynthia Shanks, all these people that trusted me with their content, Rose, even Shy Stepper, the gents, I can go down the list. My life experience in stepping would not have been what it's been without that community. And that's beyond the dance floor, the 6 count, and the 8 count. Thank you. And Sonji, keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, gentlemen, I appreciate you. And I am just going to close out right now, but I'll see you in the green room.
All right.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much to all the viewers who came on. I see that our audience has grown even in 1 week, so I'm excited for that. Please, we will be coming back next month, We the Hypotheorists, with another group of interesting steppers to have a conversation about. We're still working on it, but look out for the flyers soon, and I appreciate your support. And I love the fact that my features guest came on, and we had a great conversation. So thank you all, and have a great afternoon, and I hope you're going out dancing somewhere soon, because I am. All right. Thank you.